Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to talk about this little fella here, the Wakago PicoPresso. The Wakago PicoPresso has been out for a while and I was pretty happy to get my hands on it. As you might remember, I previously reviewed the NanoPresso, which is the predecessor, and I wasn't too impressed with that espresso maker. So I was actually both very happy and a little bit surprised that Wakago would let me review this one here. On the surface, the PicoPresso actually reminds me of the NanoPresso in a lot of ways. It has the same kind of design, the same arm that you press to build up the pressure inside the chamber. And overall, it just seems very similar in principle. The NanoPresso, however, used a pressurized basket, a kind of weird little basket made of plastic, and you weren't really able to fit a lot of coffee in there. So it almost seemed like it wasn't worth the effort, because after all, who wants to go through all the work that manual espresso can be if the resulting shot isn't that great and it's super tiny. I'm happy to say that the PicoPresso is better in almost every single way. The big difference between the PicoPresso and the NanoPresso is of course that this one here uses a real basket. So of course that will give you a lot better chance of getting a great shot compared to this weird pressurized basket that the old one used. Another good thing about the new basket is that it has a pretty good capacity. You can fit around 18 grams of coffee in there, so that means you can actually get a pretty big double shot. Overall, the PicoPresso feels a lot more heavy and sturdy compared to the NanoPresso. On the surface they look a bit similar, they kind of have the same color and design language, but when you have it in the hand, the PicoPresso just feels a lot heavier and more sturdy. For instance, it has this metal basket holder, whereas the NanoPresso is plastic all the way through. Another cool thing about the PicoPresso is that it comes with a bunch of accessories, and they're actually all pretty cool. So for instance, you have this travel case here, and it actually feels really good in the hand. It's made of this kind of smooth matte neoprene, and when you put the little brewer in here, I think you can feel pretty confident that you can just throw it into a bag and then go on some crazy hiking trip out in the wilderness. What's more is that you also get a specially designed little tamper that fits inside the PicoPresso. So when you're storing it, it fits perfectly inside the little brewer, and then you can just take it out and use it. And it's this kind of modern palm style tamper, so it's just really easy to use. There's also a little funnel that fits perfectly on the basket, and that helps to avoid making a mess when you're adding the grounds to the basket. You also have a little splash guard that you can install outside the basket, so that means that if you haven't done the distribution perfectly, then you can avoid making a big mess on your kitchen counter. What's also really cool is that they've also included a little puck rake that you can kind of use to gently massage the grounds and break up any clumps, and that will help you to avoid channeling or other espresso mishaps like that. Well, so what can I say about the workflow? I think it's the same as many other manual espresso makers. At first it seems a little bit weird, and then after you've been using the device for a few weeks, then muscle memory kicks in and everything just makes a lot more sense. I wouldn't say that the PicoPresso is necessarily better or worse than most other manual espresso makers. If anything, I actually find it a little bit easier to use. When it comes to preheating, it's not that bad. I find that you can get away with just preheating it a single time. Just add water into the brew chamber, screw the cap on, and then let it sit for a minute, pour it out, and then you add the brew water, and that should be sufficient. When it comes to that weird pumping action, I actually find that after you get used to it, it's pretty easy to build up the pressure that you need. And if you're using a little mirror or something like that, you can have a good view of the extraction with that naked portafilter. Speaking of workflow, I guess it would be appropriate to compare the PicoPresso to a few of the other manual espresso makers I have talked about on the channel before. So as you might be able to remember, the Kaflano Compresso was my favorite among the other small ultra portable espresso makers, and I think the PicoPresso does make better espresso. It makes it more consistently, and overall I just enjoy using it a little bit more. The Compresso is very demanding when it comes to getting the grind size right, and I feel like the PicoPresso is just a bit more forgiving when it comes to stuff like grind size and so on. I also think that you actually get a really nice body and texture of the shots with the PicoPresso, and with the Kaflano Compresso it was usually a bit more about clarity. The logical next step among the portable espresso makers would be the Flair Classic. It's only a little bit more expensive, but on the other hand it's a lot bigger and it's a totally different workflow. I think the PicoPresso can make comparable shots, but again you have a completely different workflow. So I guess if I were to choose a daily driver, I would probably still go with the Flair. But if I wanted something a bit more flexible, something to bring on the trip or to the office once in a while, I think the PicoPresso makes more sense. So overall I just gotta give it to Wacaco. They took the NanoPresso and then they just upgraded it in every single way. It's not even that much more expensive, and the size is still comparable. This is just a way better product. Overall I would say it's really good value. I can't think of a cheaper and better entry point to espresso, especially if we're talking portable espresso. Obviously a cheap machine would be a completely different experience, but I will say this is the cheapest, best shots you're gonna get. I think if you are looking to buy a Christmas present for somebody or just for yourself, this would be a really cool idea. But of course this is just my opinion. I'd also be curious to hear if you've tried the PicoPresso and what do you think about it. Or if you have any questions or comments about manual espresso makers in general, then let me know down in the comment section. That's it for today. I'll see you in another coffee video, hopefully very soon.